Well, welcome. Tonight I get to say to their faces what I've said when they weren't here many times. We're going to talk to the school committee. For many, many years I've said this is one of the most pivotal positions in town, because as anybody who's had teenagers knows, we're lucky to get 2 hours a day with our kids, maybe 3 if we're lucky. They get 6 to 8, or they set the policies that dictate 6 to 8 hours of our children's lives. Just unbelievably important decisions they make, because it really does affect not only people with children, but the quality of our schools affects even people without children, because number one metric that people seem to use for buying homes or paying for homes is how good's the school. So why don't we start with introductions?
Good evening. My name is Mike Walsh. I'm the chairman of the Milford School Committee.
Hi, Al. Thanks for having us. My name's Joe Marias, and I'm the vice chair of the Milford School Committee.
And my name's John Erickson. I'm just a school committee member.
Just the school committee. Let's start out. What is the school committee?
The school committee is a 7-member board that is in charge of setting policy, budget, and the hiring and firing of the superintendent of schools.
Sounds pretty simple.
Sure does, until you're sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
Now, your world revolves around 4, because every decision has to have at least 4 members supporting it, correct?
Correct.
I mean, to FinCom, we have to get 8. But 4 doesn't seem like a huge number, but
You know, Al, we're in good space right now. We're very fortunate. You know, when I first came on, there was always that 4 to 3 conversation, and you really don't hear that anymore. You know, Joe and I were talking about it today on the phone. The committee really pulls in the direction where we're all pulling for the same reasons, all going in the same direction, which makes for very productive meetings.
that's good to hear, because back when it used to be interesting to see, you know, you felt like the 9th judge on the Supreme Court. You're watching which way will Kennedy go, which way will so-and-so go, because that's going to determine
Right.
the votes. John, why are you on the school committee?
Why am I on the school committee, Al? That's a good question. And I know I've shared this with you privately. This goes back to 2014, January of 2014. We were 3 weeks into election season, and we had 2 vacated seats, and we only had 1 person who had shown enough interest to come down and take out papers, nomination papers, and hadn't even returned them at that point. And it just got me thinking, this is such an important board. This is so important in every community. We need good people that care a lot about the community to contribute, and that was my inspiration for running. It was really that simple.
Wasn't the huge salary that comes along with school?
That was reason number 2.
I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, is it school committee and finance committee are the 2 non-stipend volunteer positions, right?
That's correct.
Right.
I always got a kick out of that. You know, that you look and say, what's expected of you? Well, let's look at that. Joe, what's expected of you on the school committee? Meet once every few months?
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. there are quite a few meetings. You know, as Mike touched on it earlier, it's you're setting policy for the entire district. You're approving the budget. You're overseeing a number of positions, including the superintendent position. So there are a lot of responsibilities, and it can get time-consuming if you're serving on a number of different subcommittees as well. Mike has this year assigned, I think, 6 or 7 different subcommittees to focus on certain areas, whether it's marketing, the budget, the long-range planning process that John is serving on. There's a policy subcommittee, so it can get time-consuming and it can be demanding, but at the same time, it's also very rewarding to be able to give back to the community that you live in, that you grew up in. So like John, many of us do this because it's a way to get involved and give back to the community.
And when you say it can get busy, I mean, everybody I've ever known on the school committee seems to live the school committee.
It is busy. And you try to juggle that around your personal life, and your work life, and you want to do it right. So you want to do your research, so when you go to the meetings, you're well versed in what you're talking about, So it does keep you busy, but we all enjoy it, so it isn't like a job to us, We all have good chemistry. We get along well together, so it makes it enjoyable.
But now you're involved in every aspect. I mean, the school committee itself. You're involved in every aspect of the educational process in Milford.
Well, we are, but we also try to allow the superintendent and the administrators to do their job. We personally like them to come to us with a concern so that we can help them instead of us, the 7 members, sticking our nose where it doesn't belong. Because it doesn't work.
No, from a tactical point, I understand. They have to implement. But anything goes on in that school, it goes to the school committee for policy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right.
You start with the budget. I mean, it's every year the same. Too much money, not enough to spend it on. No, not quite that.
Well, that's one of the things that we were talking about the other night, is that we're hoping this year we'll be able to get over this hurdle, is that every year the administrators or the building principals come before us with almost like their Christmas list. This is what we're looking for our building. And inevitable, when it's all said and done and the budget's passed, somebody always feels like they were left out. They wanted,
No, sure.
so we're saying, bring everything. Bring everything to us and let's sit down and let's talk about it and see what we can do and what we can't do. But don't put something, on the list, not on the list, because you don't think we're going to go for it. Because we may.
Well, I live through it all the time because I found out that there are color photocopiers at Milford High School. Because as my daughter says, I need 300 copies of this and 200 copies of that. And it's like, they don't have this technology at the high school? She goes, you didn't give us enough money. I said, $62 million and you can't make a photocopy? Well, no, but we're not going to spend our money on that.
Right.
So, there's always stuff that, God bless the teachers for trying to squeeze that penny just that much further.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, because you're trying to meet the needs of the students, the staff, the administrators, but you have to balance that with the taxpayers as well, and that's not an easy task. But fortunately, we've got a strong team in place from an administrative perspective, and as you pointed out, we've got a very dedicated staff as well. We've got some of the best teachers in the area. I mean, how dedicated your daughter is, how hard she works, how passionate she is about what she does. And that's just one example. We see that across the board in all of our schools, and it's something that we take a lot of pride in.
So now where do you start? I mean, Milford is unique.
It's very unique.
When you sit there and say, other schools, see the school committees using profanity all the time, 2.5 override, debt exclusion, those kind of words that we don't like to hear here. So it is kind of unique that it's going to be a very hard sell for somebody to be the first to go for a 2.5 override in the town.
Well, I think honestly, our approach is that old saying, the speed of the leader is the speed of the team. We try to lead by example. We try to be very professional, on camera and off camera. We conduct ourselves out in the community. We respect people. We get respect in return, and people see that. And so when you come into the finance committee meetings or you go to town meeting, people have a different, feeling on you.
They do, and I think our district has earned the reputation of being very good with their money.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got to be hard. I mean, where do you start when a principal comes in and says, I really want or I need this? And you look and say, yeah, but we don't have enough money for a lot of things.
I was just going to say, one of the things we're trying to do this year is have a little bit more engagement with the building principals. One of the ideas Joe and I discussed with the administration as part of the budget subcommittee is having each school liaison meet with the building principals to hear their wish list and their needs. Each building principal presents their budget to the administration who in the past has presented it to us, which is still the case, but just that little bit of involvement, deeper involvement. In talking with the principal of Milford High School earlier this year, she had a department that had a zero budget. How does that happen? Something slipped by somewhere, and I can't remember which department that was within Milford High School, but it's something that we're just hoping to get a little bit more deeper involvement as committee members with the building principals, not to change any of the process, but just to deepen it and enrich it.
I think the hard part is, realistically, you have the same problem that when Tom O'Laughlin or TUI Rev 2 comes before us, they have great ideas, they have absolutely sound needs, and then we look at the budget. And we say, yeah, sounds great, but you get 62% of every dollar Milford spends.
Right.
For you to get 63 means some other department is going to get less. In departments like police with 94% salary, taking a percent away from police means cops are gone.
Right.
That's why communication is so important, right? So internally, to John's point, we need to be as informed as we can be, right? So we can see the bigger picture. So it's important that we meet with the administration on a regular basis to talk about budget, but we also meet with individual principals to hear what their concerns are, and then look at the bigger picture and really start to prioritize things. What can we push off to next year, the year after, the year after? Where are the priorities within the district? But then beyond that, across the town, improving communication with your board, with the finance committee, improving communication with town hall, with some of these other departments. Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to your point, we have to prioritize the needs of the schools with the needs of the fire department, the police,
right,
and the highway, and all these other groups. So it's important to have those conversations, get everyone on the same page, and figure out as a community, where do we want to invest our dollars? Now, we're somewhat biased on the school committee.
And you should be.
Because
if you're not biased towards the kids, I don't know who's going to be.
Exactly. So we're going to
It's like
advocate.
Tom O'Laughlin coming in and saying, I really do care about the police officers and safety in this town. Well, I hope so.
Right.
Right, but what happens is, being in the school department, we know every year, year after year, we're the biggest chunk of the budget in the town of Milford. And every year, we know we're coming with a little bigger ask. And it's talked about at town meeting. So we need to be prepared so that when we go to town meeting, we can sell that to the taxpayers. We don't want them to think that we're blowing smoke at them, because that's not what we want to do. These are legitimate concerns that we have that we would like to fund. And thank God the Finance Committee and the taxpayers of Milford have always been with us.
Yeah.
And I think we all do look at the big picture from the town. What can the town budget sustain and support? We don't look at it as it's us versus, school versus general government.
Right.
In my 2 seasons of budget preparation, it's been, what can the town
Well,
support?
at the end of the day, years ago, for my first year on the Finance Committee, I was on the subcommittee for school budgets. And I remember talking about how many rolls of toilet paper were going to be used at Woodland. And I went to Mark, who was chair at the time, I said, this is not a way to fly. This is not a way to run an airline.
Right.
We don't know enough. And frankly, we shouldn't get involved in how much electricity, how much, we should set up a model, which now is about 60 some odd million of our 100 goes to the school. You all are hired at a phenomenal salary of zero, but you're elected, but you're really hired to be the board.
That's correct.
So why would we try, our job is to give you what money we can and then let you spend it the best way you know, which of course never really works out because, Kathy will come in and say, I need 5%. I need 8%. Well, yeah, you need it, but most you're going to get this year is, 3. And there's...
The toughest thing, Al, is, and I think Joe and John would agree with me, is when you're in negotiations, teacher contract negotiations, and you're trying to settle on that number. Well, once you settle on that number, it's all the back end numbers that are coming through steps and lanes and, years of service, and that's an area you really got to be careful of. So when we're negotiating, sometimes the teachers think we're trying to get
Sure.
lower than what they want. But really what we're trying to do is we know that the majority of them, because we're looking at retirements and things like that, we know a higher number's actually coming.
Well, I mean, that whole chutes and ladders, the lanes and the steps, and it's like, guys, it all comes out of the same pot.
Right.
We had that discussion many times with school business managers where they start telling, well, you don't understand, we need 4% just to take care of our contract. And it's like, no, the contract says the survivors will get these benefits.
Yeah.
It gets to a point where you sit there and say, guess what? You got 40 retiring, you may only be able to hire 35.
Yeah, but the way that Jerry has us set up to do the negotiations, when you sit on the first one as a new member, you're kind of like, but after you've done it, it's the perfect way to do it because it just airs everything out. It takes a little while, but by the end, everybody's satisfied.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's what you said, John. We've got so many dollars. We get more dollars, school gets more dollars.
Right.
But you can only stretch it so far. And then you got to look at the long term. I mean, I'm already hearing the growling when we had that nice surplus last year and we wanted to put more away. Yeah, a few citizens came and said, you had a $5.8 million surplus. What do you have to say about that? I said, not enough. Right. I said, why? I said, there's a school coming. And everybody laughed, so we just built one. I said, right. And 11 years ago, we said there was a school coming. And the reason we could build Woodland the way we did is we started saving. And I believe today, I haven't seen the long-range ed plan yet, hint, hint.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's in progress.
But when we had that 12 years ago, we started saving for Woodland. And it worked.
And you started saving for Woodland on the town side, and from a school committee perspective, from a district perspective, there was a moratorium on capital spending, right? So we held off on bringing forth any additional capital items because we knew the Woodland School was going to come online. And so we held off on a lot of projects that we need to start to address now going forward, and that's going to be part of the next long-range planning process. But you mentioned the $60 million earlier, and that's an all-encompassing number that the town spends on education. It includes all the benefits that are part of our budget. It includes Blackstone Valley Tech. I think our budget last year was somewhere around $45 million, but then we add all those other things in, it gets up to 60. But one thing that we've been talking, John and I have been talking about as part of the budget subcommittee and the broader committee has been talking about is providing some additional context around that number. Because when you hear 45 million or 60 million, it sounds like a lot of money, right? And it is a lot of money. It absolutely is. But let's put some context around that to demonstrate that that is still a conservative number, that we have been managing that budget conservatively, that we have done a good job negotiating contracts over the years so that our teacher salaries are in line with...
Joe, I don't think anybody would criticize you for saying you're spendthrifts, you spend money, like, we didn't really need Woodland. The old Woodland was so nice, we could have lived another 10 years with, I mean, it's not that. I think the fundamental point is we have a lot of people who built Milford, living on $1,200, $1,500 a month.
Right.
And so it's fixed income. So as John, how much can you get? You can't go to them and say, well, we're going to raise your taxes. I mean, I saw it in a town close to us where they put a $500 additional tax on every homeowner. Well, I mean, that's a lot of money if you're living on $1,500 a month. And yes, they need a new school.
And that's why it was so important for us to put, and John accepted, thank God, to be on the long-range educational plan, because one of the things that you mentioned is the high school. And, we need John's expertise as the, building inspector.
May make it easier to get permits.
Well, not that, is that, everybody talks about renovation, but now you have people saying it's a lot less money to build a new one, like we did Woodland, and knock the old one down. So that's where we need his expertise. When that subject comes up, he'll be the person who'll say, that's not necessarily
true.
true.
Mike, sometimes we play these games, this mating ritual we go through. I remember when they talked, should we build a new Woodland or renovate? And I just laughed. There's no choice. The high school, if you came out and said, we should build a new high school, what do you do, just out of curiosity, with 1,100 kids for the couple of years that you're going to be building a high school?
One of the things they're talking about is out back. Build a new building out back, and then bring everything from the back to the front when you knock it down.
Enough room?
Yeah, they say it is. But
Well, no,
again,
actually, I don't think that there is. I haven't looked, I've looked at it, but not real closely, but I don't think there's enough room out back. I don't think that that's going to end up being a viable plan.
I'll go
But see what I mean? That's
out
why
on a
we need
limb and say what I believe what will happen. I mean, 1974, we moved in. I was in the first class that graduated out of there. Unbelievable. There's so much room here. We can house 3 towns. You know, you can bring everybody in Massachusetts into this school the way it looked. But we haven't added 1 square foot. No, we've only added 1 kid per year.
so in 1974, what was the enrollment of the high school total, do you think?
I go by graduating class.
Okay.
In 1974, 222 children graduated. 42 years later, last year, 263.
Yeah.
You've added 1 kid per year. But Jose Vieira put it in perspective for me because he said, Al, it's not the number of kids, it's the geography per kid.
Right.
What we needed when we were in school,
Right.
special needs programs, English. I mean, I was in the ELL program. They stuck me in a class and said, learn English. Okay. So, there was no special area. We never took care of our special needs kids the way we do now. And God forbid anybody would ever think of going backwards.
Right.
That dog doesn't hunt. We
Right.
just never would do that. But, I look and I say, you've got a high school that we haven't added a square foot to in 40 years. I'll go out on a limb. You know what I bet's going to happen? We're going to build a new wing. We're going to shut down one wing, move the kids in there, renovate that wing, shut down the other wing, and just play rotating.
Yeah.
And then, field house. Build a field house. While we're doing this renovation, please, let's think about, I go to Shrewsbury, and I see what they put up for their kids. Wow.
Yeah.
That's something that, it's kind of like we did the field.
That was 68 million, if I'm not mistaken, right, that high school?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But, let's say it does cost, and we start saving today.
Right.
Adding in today's dollars another 5 or 6 million for a proper field house. We did $5 million for the Utes,
Yeah.
right?
5.5.
$5.5 million is not done yet.
Right.
And you start thinking about how many kids, and I'm not slamming the youth center, but
No, I understand.
when you look at building another wing or building a field house on the high school, you have over 1,000 kids using it every day.
Right.
So, my idea, candidly, is start planning. And it's going to take 8 or 10 years because one thing, we can't build it ourselves.
Right.
We're going to have to get, Woodland we couldn't.
Right.
I guess we could have, but it would have really strained everything if we had to come up with 60 million, not 30.
Right.
Right.
So I'd love to see a plan. And personally, I don't see where you destroy our new field, and do all that, and then you got that swamp back there.
Yeah, you have the wetlands, you have a stream that runs right through the back of the property.
So 10 years from now, when we're sitting here, we'll see if a new school goes up in the back, or if we don't just build another wing or some kind of,
Yeah.
transitory area. But then you'd end up with a whole wing.
Yeah.
And when you're all done, you got a whole nother wing that you can use for the school.
Yeah. And obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done with that long-range
sure.
planning process. And they started a couple months ago, and I think the plan is to have them in sometime in January, February, to give an update on where they are, and then hopefully finalize some sort of plan, or get closer to finalize it towards the end of next year. But I think it starts with identifying what are our curriculum needs, what are our programming needs
drives it
first.
all?
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
let's figure out what that need is.
Any business plan, can you imagine you going to Kevin saying, I want to go spend $5 million on what? I don't know yet, but I want to make it better.
Right.
I can't imagine that would be a very long meeting,
No.
or any of us.
No. And you hear John talk all the time, space needs. What are the space needs?
Yeah, the high school is overfilled, so to speak. They're having, I have mentioned this in the past, classes in rooms that are really not classrooms.
I'm hearing there's teachers with no classrooms.
There's 8 transient teachers, I believe, at
It
last
reminds me
count.
of Woodland when they had Moffett, poor Mel, the custodian, would have to wait in between when Mr. Moffett was teaching the kids violin to go in and get toilet paper and things because they were using his janitor's closet.
Right.
And then we had the stage that all of a sudden became a classroom. The high school's starting to look like that.
Yeah, and don't forget, we have early childhood down there, so, part of this first steps in the long-range planning is deciding if we want to keep early childhood under the roof of the high school, or what we want to do with it long-term.
Well, we hit another sensitive subject. You got a whole empty building.
Great point.
That we do.
I've
I
been
mean, I'm
talking-
hearing we
I've
have
been
8
talking about-
teachers with no classrooms. We have all these, residents with no country. Okay, great. Got a whole dang building sitting there, and
Yeah.
it's empty.
And that's probably in the early part of the long-range planning process is making the decision that whether or not we want to move early childhood, and if we do, where do we go? Does it fit in East? Certainly not in its current configuration, but what would it take to make it an early childhood center? Moving the administration, does that make sense?
I mean, when I
And
think
what are
about it,
what are the
and
costs
again,
associated?
my knowledge of the education process is, infinitely smaller than y'all. But I sit there and say, okay, Lenny Moore Cone and community use. Everybody loves the program. The one thing they complain about is you can't get to them. And nobody would want to reduce security in the schools.
Right.
But during the day, you need papal dispensation, rightfully so, and that's what we want for our kids,
Right.
to get in that building. Central office. I mean, I think of those two alone as almost minimal disruption that would open up a lot of space.
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's the part where we're struggling with, and we still need to do a lot more research on, because there are a number of different groups that you could easily move out of the high school, like central office, community use, family resource center.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pick on any of them.
A
No,
number of
no, no,
different
but
groups,
that's our
but-
job. Our job is to figure it out.
And then I hear that, well, it would cost a couple $1 million to renovate. Okay. Yes. Do you remember what we spent on Brookside renovating other places to get us through a few years? Something tells me if we had a strong long-range ed plan and we needed a couple $1 million here or there in capital, we probably could find it.
Most definite.
Yeah, and those are the conversations we've had. And moving central office and the other offices we've talked about makes sense for a number of reasons, but that's limited space that it's occupying. So the real decision is early childhood, because they're taking up over 30,000 square feet right now.
That's half of Middle School East.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
See, we have a whole Middle School East empty, and you just found use for half.
Yeah, but the challenge is that suitable space
Well,
for
see, I
3 to
don't-
5 year olds. And that's the part we're
that's the
struggling
problem.
with. that we need
That's,
to figure
and where do
out.
you put the parking, and
Exactly.
where do they have a play area?
Right.
See, I mean, that's the kind of things, when I think of, Kevin McIntyre doesn't need a big play area. He doesn't have as much geography to give up, but you don't have parking and all the issues, the traffic flow, that if you move a shining star, that you got to deal with.
And a lot of these kids are kids with special needs too. So that school would require a lot more than just some basic upgrades.
Yeah.
So those are things that we're talking through and working through. And
Well, I mean, one way or another, you're going to pay for 60% of the maintenance of that school. If you don't use 1 square foot in that building, you're still paying for 60% of it.
if the town keeps it.
Yeah, God bless. If I could dream, and somebody'd come in and say, I want to buy this building and pay you lots of taxes and take the liability and the renovation off your back. I almost believe Shano's idea of making it a park is more viable, and I don't like that either. Because I really do think, candidly, that we're going to end up keeping the building. Because every time you even talk about the gym, people have a heart attack. We need the gym, just like we need soccer fields.
Well, I talk about it all the time too, we talk about it from school use, and then you go across the street to John's office, and you got people doubled up in offices, you got no storage space, that's our own town hall. So does the town have somewhat of a use for
Yes.
it, as well as the school has a use for it?
That's why, I've said it more than once, what I end up believing is going to happen is we're going to keep the building, we're going to use some of it for the municipal, Because we're a $100 million company. You know, when Paul Revere built the town hall, there was plenty of room for him and all his friends. Now, all of a sudden, at $100 million a year, we're adding people, and it's like nowhere to put them.
I say all the time, and it's funny you bring that number up, Al, the town of Milford's a $100 million a year corporation.
Right.
With no human resources department.
Give us time.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Give us time.
And no space to put one. If
Well,
we do
there's
that,
that's what I'm
the fundamental
saying.
problem. I've
That's
gone
the
to
saying.
Zach and said, HR, seriously, when are we going to address it? And he goes, what closet? Who don't I
Right,
like that I can put
exactly.
him in? So, you know, I can see Middle School East staying as a municipal building. Yeah, I really can. I can see the school keeping a chunk of it, town hall keeping a chunk of it, and protecting the gym.
Well, and this is a great example of where we really need to collaborate, right? So we need to get the school committee, the selectmen, members of the FinCom together and really talk about what makes the most sense for the community as a whole. Because there are a number of needs that we could potentially meet with using that space. You know, I think
There
there's
may
still
be
some work to be done
programs you
with
can
it.
put in on VOC programs. You know, many times, and I know I'm prejudiced towards people like my father, who came over from Portugal. You put him in an organic chemistry class, he would not do well, but give him a tool. He's an artist. He was an artist. He could use any tool. He could do anything with his hands. Today, if he went to the Milford school system, he couldn't get into Blackstone because he's not the top
Right.
academic group. Well, I mean, he wants to be a vocational guy, but without the academic credentials, he's not getting in. Love to see things like the hotel. You're
Right.
giving kids a chance that they wouldn't.
Well, we're on the second phase of that now. We're actually working with Mass Bay Community College in their automotive program. And what will happen is the kids will get some of their academics with the high school. Some of their academics will actually be done at Mass Bay, so they can potentially come out a year ahead in their college education because they're going to be allowed to take college courses and their high school courses together. And then some of their lab will be done in Mass Bay and Ashland at the Automotive Center. Some of their lab work will be done at Imperial. So that's the second program we're working on right now, the vocational program.
And you know, of all the things I've heard you, Kevin, the whole crowd at Imperial do, that's the one that'll tip my hat. It's nice that you give money, it's nice that you're involved, that's all great. But when I heard that you were opening up the doors for Milford kids who wouldn't get a chance, that to me is profound.
Creates opportunity too, though, Al. In the United States alone, there's 6,000 to 7,000 shortages of automobile technicians a year. 6,000 to 7,000. So you have companies like Mercedes-Benz now, they're paying their full education, they're giving them all the tools, they're giving them, you know, if they graduate top in the class, they get a car. I mean, all these incentives to, you know, to pull these people, you know, into the field.
Well, you know, plus when we were kids, getting out in 3 years, I don't know if that was a huge benefit from college. I mean, I had to go work and be a real person a year early.
Yeah.
But today, when these kids are paying, you know, $30,000 to $60,000 a year, that's a huge nut not to have to spend.
You know, one of the fastest growing trends in the United States right now for grandparents? Grandparents are retiring early because their children are coming out of college so burdened in school loans, then they get married, then they buy a house, now they want to start a family, they can't afford daycare.
Daycare.
So mom and dad say, you know what, we're all right, we'll get by. And they come out and they take, you know, little Johnny or Sally 3 days a week.
Well, think about it. I don't know about you all, but when I graduated, I had $32.80 in my pocket.
Yeah.
But I didn't have this massive debt, the old Portuguese aversion to debt.
Right.
My parents had paid Holy Cross. So at least I started level. When I see these kids walking out having to pay $1,000+ a month, where does that leave room to buy a car, to buy a house, to do anything?
And the kids are getting much smarter about it. And it's one of those, we're so excited about this early college credit program that Kevin and Carrie are working on putting into place, where you can get credit at the college level so that you only have to go for 3 years to get your bachelor's degree. That's going to save a lot of money. But students now are also looking at state schools a lot more than they have in the past. When you have valedictorians that are choosing or opting to go to a state school to get their undergrad because they know they're eventually going to go and get their graduate
When we
degree someplace.
applied to UMass, that was your ultimate safety school. You got in, it was like, oh God, I don't have to learn to say, do you want fries with that order?
Yeah.
Today, it's far from a slam dunk.
Oh,
When you look at what's happened, mainly because, okay, if I go to Holy Cross, I walk out, it's $250,000 it cost me to get my education. I go to UMass, it's 120.
Right.
That's a lot. At 120 can give you a huge part of your house.
When you look at that honors program they have at UMass, you're getting the same level of education that you're getting in some of these Ivy League schools at a fraction of the cost.
Well, now, and I think the state has put a lot more resources into the UMass system. And when you start bringing in more talented kids, you know, I mean, I look at some of the schools now, when I see what it takes to get into, like my old school, Holy Cross, I don't know that I'd get in this time if it was me applying.
Yeah.
You know, you look at UMass, it's as competitive as any place now.
Yeah.
So what is the biggest challenge you think you're going to face this year?
biggest challenge we're going to face this year. I don't know. I don't really think, in my opinion, that we have a big challenge to face. I think we have projects that we're working on, but, you know, to say a big challenge, I don't, unless, you know, Joe and John disagree with me, I don't see something big. You know, we work every day at what we do, you know.
Yeah, I guess it's all in how you define challenge, right? I think to Mike's point, that I think the big areas of focus right now for the next year is finishing up that long-range plan, technology, and you know, there's been a lot of work done there with the E-rate, bringing Matt on board, and I'm sure we'll get into a discussion about technology in a minute, but there's been a lot of work done there, and there's still a lot of work left to be done there from a technology perspective. And then Woodland came online this year, and it's a new school. Everything's new. You got to work through the kinks, right? So we're learning as we go. Tim's doing a great job at that school. The administration's doing a good job supporting him. But we're, you know, there's always going to be bumps in the road, and we're working through that because, again, we are doing everything for the first
Just
time
the
in
landscaping.
that school.
Oh God,
right.
the bushes. I hear once more about the bushes. No, I think the biggest challenge I was thinking of is, what do you do with the 5th grader who's been at Woodland? Everything's Chromebooks, right? Everything's electronic, top of the line, and you say, welcome to Miss Angelini's home. Here's your stone tablet.
Well, hopefully not.
No,
Yeah,
but I mean,
we're
no, but
working on
seriously.
that, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I laugh because I said this whole Chromebook initiative, if it works. Do you remember when we had the autism program and it was only for grades 1 and 2? Then you said, what happens when they go to grade 3? Well, you have to expand it. Grade 4. And it was a good thing, thank God.
Right.
But isn't this whole technology initiative the same? I mean, not that Stacy has stone tablets, but
And it is the same, but, you know, we are working on a plan, specifically our new instructional technology director. He did a presentation to the school committee 2 meetings ago.
Yes.
And an abridged version to the finance committee subcommittee shortly after that. So he does have his, you know, his thumb on the needs.
Have you met him yet?
oh yes, he
Yeah.
comes on the show.
He's very talented. Very.
And that's really our biggest priority from a technology perspective is those Chromebooks, because
Right.
you can't have that
New
lapse.
Chromebooks.
New Chromebooks. So the intent or the plan that he laid forth is to roll it out over the next 2 years and have 3rd grade through 12th grade all outfitted with Chromebooks.
And what the mindset that we have to change is, Al, from our generation, we bought a book. We bought a series of math books or whatever it was, and they would be in that classroom for 10
Oh,
to
World Book Encyclopedia. It's
10 to
good for
15 years.
10 to 15 years.
That philosophy is gone. You're constantly updating your,
This-
you know, because your IT is constantly, your technology is changing.
You're getting 3 years. It's a disposable. I mean, unfortunately, you almost have to look at it. I don't know that the machines will wear out, but the technology will pass you by.
Changing so fast.
Yeah, and it's funny you say 3 years because that's part of his plan. Matt's plan is a third year you start the replacement process.
Yes.
Right, and to your point, Mike's point, technology is a part of our lives. You can't, no matter what you do for a career, no matter what you do in your everyday life, you're utilizing technology. So what we're doing in the classroom needs to reflect that as well, right?
If we're going to have our kids competitive, I mean, think about your department in Imperial.
Mm-hmm.
Would you hire somebody who can't use a computer?
Absolutely no. I won't hire anybody without an associate's degree, minimum associate's degree.
But it comes down to if somebody was computer illiterate, I can't say that, that's bad, computer challenged,
Yep.
they couldn't survive in any role
No
that I
way.
can think of. I mean, I look at my car now and
Right.
you got to be kidding me. If you're not almost a computer expert, you can't even talk to my car.
Well, that's what we talk about at work all the time. Not that we don't do engine and transmission
Right.
work, but very little of what we're doing. A lot of it is software. Software downloads all day long, to the point now where they actually have what's called a Y-Advisor tablet, which a tablet is all it is. And while you're checking in the customer in the drive lane, it's checking for software flashes that need to be loaded into that car. And while you're doing a walk around with the customer, it's downloading software into their car, updating all their computer modules.
But I think you're on to that, the fundamental brick that starts the wall is the long-range ed plan.
Right.
Because when you think about it, 14, 15 years ago we started talking, a dozen years ago, whether you liked it or not, you got consensus that that's the best of the worst or the best of the best, whatever way you want to look at it, but it is the plan.
Yep. And we've taken some shots from some people that said, well, you want to keep that building over there, but that building was supposed to be scrapped, surplused as part of that, long-range educational plan. And what we have to say to the people is that, but that was 12, 14 years ago. Things change.
Right.
Things change. So let's just slow down for a second and look at the change. Maybe we do have a use for that building.
Well, we don't. We had a long-range ed plan that we had stables outside when Milford was first made.
Yeah.
It's not that we want to maintain kids taking horses to school. Okay, things have changed.
Right.
I mean, I have no issue at all saying that was then. We certainly have gotten our money's worth out of all the money we invested. Now, I think, if anything, we could be faulted for is not having a new long-range ed plan ready to rock when the old one was fulfilled.
Yeah.
Because I think shutting or opening Woodland, let's keep it positive, not shutting down Middle School East, was the last step. Now we got to look what's next.
Well, the last step actually was to build a new early childhood center in the old long-range, the original long-range ed plan, if you will. And it talked about possibly renovating Woodland if new Woodland was built, at a different site, or renovating the existing space for the early childhood center. So that's the last piece of the old plan, which really hasn't been implemented yet, and of course that's going to morph into the new plan.
It'll be the beginning of the next.
And the other thing, I guess everybody has to realize is that in that old, the original long-range plan, Woodland was supposed to be opened a decade ago.
Yes.
So we're basically 8 to 10 years behind on that
$60
plan.
million. That's why I say, when I say there's a new school coming, anybody who says, well, we should build a high school in the next year or two, it's like, oh, I hope somebody hit the lottery.
Yeah.
Because if we had to try and come up with the money ourselves, that would make it monumentally more difficult. $30 million for Woodland out of our pocket was a big chunk of change. I keep saying, when I was a kid, $30 million, you could have bought Milford. They would have thrown in Oakdale. Never mind one building.
Right.
You
And you mentioned earlier the $30 million for Woodland and the $5 million out of pocket we spent to renovate the youth center.
But that's why you got to start early. We were fortunate with the youth center that we could pay for it in cash.
Right.
Because essentially it was all done out of surplus, and so it didn't really add anything to our long-term debt. You can't do 30 million.
No.
There's no way. But things like this year where we had tucked money away for the big Tui toy, $1 million ladder truck.
1.1.
we didn't have to touch it. Well, that's $1 million towards a new school. You know, and all of those pieces, if we work together,
Right.
we can get done what we need. But again, it's going to start with all of us buying on to what is the plan going to be. And if I remember how fun the last one was to get consensus, I can't imagine this one will be any easier. No, because
I tend to think there won't be as much disagreement as to the plan this go around as there was the last one.
I don't know, John.
I'm being optimistic, Al.
You know, you've got things like Stacy. If you remember when I came back to Milford when I was overseas, I got a complex because West Street School, where I went to, had been torn down. Oliver Street School sold. Spruce Street School turned into the library. Stacy boarded up. I said, I think I've been jinxed.
Yeah.
But you know, the most economical thing would have been to tear Stacy down and put up an ugly glass, you know, cookie cutter school. You can't argue it. But it was Milford granite.
Right.
There's something about that building that when you looked at it,
Even when you're inside of it, and you're in the old section with the catwalks that are going up and down. And
but you know, it was, to me, the greatest thing in the world to save that building. Like the Utes, you know, just like the youth center, that's Milford granite.
Yep.
You know, $5 million, we probably could have built a different building, but it wouldn't have the same history, character.
Right.
Yeah, it's certainly a beautiful building. The challenge with a project like that is that you're making a lot. You're compromising a lot. There are things that you want to do that you just can't do because it's not.
You're spending more money than you have to.
Right.
And you just have to deal with saying, I mean, Mark and I have this argument every 3 years. When the Parks Department comes up and wants to renovate Pheno Field Pool, he'll present a very logical argument where it makes so much more sense to shut down Pheno and just take over Casey. Logically, he's shown me, yep, okay. He says, what do you think? I said, no, Pheno Field is Milford. That's where we swam, I mean, all of us. You became a big kid when you could swim across the middle and you could get to the pier. You know, when I had children, small kids, you could take a picnic basket and go down because they had trees. Casey didn't have any.
Right. You have the fields you can play in.
It's where we grew up. It's part of being
It's the Milford culture.
But that's it. So yes, we're going to pound our chests and tell the school committee we're broke, we have no money. You're going to say if you don't give us tons of money, the sun won't shine, the moon won't rise, and somewhere at the end we compromise.
Yep, we do.
And we work together so that we do save a few pennies. And when it comes down to saving a little bit of Milford character, we all seem to agree that, well, we don't want to spend the money, but we have to.
Yep.
You know, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. From a school committee point of view, ELL seemed to be, you know, at 2 town meetings ago, the focus. What's going on?
Continue to do a great job educating those students, just like we do every other student. You know, the numbers continue to increase, but we're doing a great job managing that. We're very fortunate to have Jen Lancaster as the ELL director. She's probably one of the most passionate and knowledgeable people in the state when it comes to educating.
Do you have to
those
be named
students.
Jen? I mean, wait a minute, let's see. You got Jen Walsh, which for passion,
Yeah.
Jen Lancaster, and now you got Jen Ward. I mean, is it like if you want to be involved with Milford kids, you got to be named Jen?
Yeah.
I don't know, but to Joe's point, she gave us a report the other night, and the numbers are increasing, and what she's doing with the resources that she has to work with is phenomenal.
But the fundamental question is, are the typical kids suffering because of the influx of ELL kids? That's the question people ask.
No, I think they're benefiting from it. They're benefiting from having that diversity. It's the real world, right? It's there are lots of different people out there, and you have to learn to interact with all of them and learn from their experiences. So
I guess the question I'd ask you is, take you all the way back when you first got dropped into that classroom. Did the other children in that classroom, did they get affected because you were in there?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't remember
I guarantee you taught them Portuguese and they taught you
Right.
English.
That was, I mean, I think back, and it was only when I moved back that I found out I was from one of the tougher or the harder to teach areas, the Heights. So I'm glad nobody ever told me when I was a kid that I was one of those at-risk kids. Because I don't want to know that. We just went to school, had our friends, Water Street was always the great unification point. Because the kids from Luby Ave, when we got together on Wednesday nights to go to Hopedale Band Concert, as soon as you went over Water Street, turned your hat, and nobody messes with them. They're from Milford. Of course, when we came back over, it's like, shoot, get out of here. Go back to Luby Ave. It's like having cousins. Where it was family.
Yeah.
And you never really knew all these things about, well, these are at-risk kids. Well, please don't tell them.
Right.
Because I'm glad nobody ever told us.
Right. Right.
But, that is a question that keeps coming up. All the money we put into special needs and ELL, does it hurt the typical kids?
I mean, having been there 8 years now, my answer to that would be a flat no. If you feel that is the case, you need to go into the schools and you need to see what's being done in the schools.
And at the end, I'll say it again. I've always said it. We're all prejudiced towards our school system. To me, the real judges aren't the McIntyres, the Walshes, the Mariases. It's the colleges.
Right.
Right.
If our kids were applying to top flight colleges and getting turned down, then I'd say, guys, we got a real problem.
Yeah.
But, personally, I saw my daughter get into every college she wanted to go to.
Well, as you know, Al, every year we have senior night and we shoot up on the wall a picture of the student and where they're going to school, and we all sit there and we say, look at that, look at that, look at that school. And college isn't for everybody, I understand that, but the schools that our kids are getting into and the number of our students that are going to college keeps growing, getting better and growing and growing.
But see, Lexi put it into perspective for me. When she said, Dad, as an educator, my job is to bring every kid to their potential.
Right.
No, not every kid has the same potential for the same area.
Right.
But whether it's special needs, typical, advanced, if all of us as teachers bring you to your potential, then we've done our jobs.
You've done your job. Absolutely.
And one of the things that I take the most pride in as a resident of Milford is the fact that our schools are really focused on the whole child. So when you look at our academic offering, you look at our athletic offering, you look at the arts, the music, and theater programs, there's something there for everyone.
Right.
And our job is to make sure that those resources are there and that those programs are there, but at the end of the day, it's up to that individual student to make the most of what's available to them. And if they don't, shame on them, right? So it's really up to them to make the most of that
And the
opportunity.
parents.
So I was gonna say,
And
shame on the
exactly.
parent. Yeah.
Because
Right.
I remember when Lexi was, no, it was Emily. She was trying to decide where she'd fit better. We're trying to figure out, because obviously I was prejudiced towards Milford. We went up to the Fay School, and the children, wonderful presentations. They really represented well. The thing that sunk it for me is when I asked this little girl, where are you from? She said, Hopkinton. I said, well, how much do you interact? Oh, we never interact with people from our town. I looked and said, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
They have their whole lives to be real people. Let them be kids.
Exactly.
Let them establish the ties. I mean, we joke about calling Milford the center of the universe, but there are, when I grew up, first thing I wanted to do like any Milford kid is run away. Go see the rest of the world. And I loved Washington, I loved Paris. When I had a family, that gravitational pull brought me right back home.
To me, Al, and you and I have spoke about this before, I've never seen anything like it, having two grown children myself. I always say the night before Thanksgiving, and you guys will get a kick out of it, depending where you are in your age group, depends on where you are, like Scioli's.
Scioli's, yeah.
And they're all kids that all went to school together, all grew up, they're all professionals now, but they still come back if they're living in Milford, they're here, or they come back to Milford to be with family, but they all get together. That's a very unique thing in a community.
You know, and it's funny because we grew up with it, so it seems normal.
Right.
Yeah, we just had our 25-year reunion. I think I saw that you had your reunion as well. Probably not 25,
Ours,
but
no, I was going to say, ours was very far from it, and ours was an informal reunion. We all turned 60 this year,
oh, okay.
so it wasn't an official class reunion. We just decided we'll have a 60th birthday party.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun because it's people you haven't seen in a long time. But everyone had the same comment. Like, no matter how much time passes, no matter where you are, what stage in life you're in, there's a bond there with your classmates that you never lose. And that's something that I really hope every class that graduates from Milford today feels the same way, that they have that connection to Milford, they have that connection to their classmates, because these are the people that are going to be by your side on your wedding day. They're going to be there when you have a baby. They're going to be there when you're having issues down the road.
I can look at my kids and the friends they have, and what they still do with Milford High friends. And okay, so that's 40 years since I was there, and it's the same. We got together at Scioli's.
Yeah.
Because one of the kids, God almighty, one of the 60-year-olds was coming home from Colorado, and Eddie sent out a note saying, I'm going to be home over Thanksgiving. Anybody interested? So a whole bunch of us just piled on and went down for pizza and just to hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing to have.
Well, in 3 months, probably more focus on budget. When we have you back in 3 months, that'll be an interesting turn to see how far we've gone. But as always, we'll beat our chest, say we're broke, we have no money. You'll come back and say, if you don't do this, the sun won't shine, and somewhere in the middle will be a number that you can live with and we can afford. And we'll
I'll move forward.
all move forward. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure, thank you.
And as always, if you have any questions, many, many years ago, high school principal, when I asked how do I get the best for my child, he said get involved. There's so many ways you can get involved and learn what's available for your child. And it starts with a phone call. Call the principal, call the superintendent, call the school committee. If you have any doubts, if you have any questions, call, learn, and you'll be very, very pleased. So as always, thank you to our 6 loyal viewers. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just